Let's stick on this Olympic stuff a little bit more, and why don't you explain to us how you, who never even probably been around ice very much, being from
No,
Oklahoma,
nope,
and then like you said,
nope.
you end up training in Texas to being a bobsledder. Like that's kind of a jump.
Yeah, yeah, it is. So like you just said, the first it really kind of happened was as I got done with my collegiate career, and a lot of it got ended short because of injuries. So my baseball career ended. I had tore my labrum and rotator cuff in my pitching arm, and so then that's why I ended up at OSU. And then whenever I got to OSU, I had some knee issues and had some knee surgeries, and Um, so with my degree, I went down to McKinney, Texas to Michael Johnson Performance Center, which is where the sprinter Michael Johnson himself owns a facility down there. And so it's really Olympic themed. It's all about speed and things like that. So a lot of guys get ready for the NFL Combine there, and a lot of guys come back and train throughout the year. So I was down there and I met a guy who was in NFL Canada, trying to kind of make it back in the NFL, but it probably wasn't going to work out for him. He was a fringe guy anyway, so his time had kind of come to an end, but he was in incredible shape. And so they were like, hey, you should try bobsled, man. Like, you're fast, you're strong, go do it. And so he did it,
Huh.
and he ended up making the Sochi games in 2014. And so I stayed in contact with him through all that. And I knew his measurements and how fast he was and how strong he was. And I was pretty comparable in a lot of ways. And so I was like, man, my body's finally feeling good again because I had taken some time off and just really just trained just because I enjoyed training. And so he kind of walked me through the process. And so I went and did a combine at Colorado Springs at the Olympic Training Center there. And I checked all the boxes there, did really well. And so they're like, hey, come out to a rookie camp in Lake Placid, New York, which is the another training center, but it's the headquarters for all the winter sports athletes. And so went out there and got the crash course on how to push a bobsled and what all it takes. And then I got asked to start on the team after that. I did really well. And then I was lucky enough, I made the national team for the next 3 years and was racing against the world's best and just really throwing myself into it. No, understanding this is probably my last go around at a high level of athletics and seeing what we can do.
Nice. So, how many times did you eat it on the ice trying to get into that bobsled, trying to learn how to do that thing?
There's luckily I did not. Now there was plenty of guys that did, because you actually kind of psych yourself out more than it actually is difficult. So you actually have spikes that are specifically made for the ice, and it's just like hundreds of little, almost like nails looking aspect. So you don't really, when you're sprinting, your heels don't touch anyways, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when you first start, all you're thinking is like, half my shoe has nothing on it. Like, what am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to do out here? But it doesn't matter, right? So it's kind of like a fight or flight instinct the first time. I mean, you're holding on so tight, man. Oh my gosh. Like I can still remember my first trip down and like it's one of the more violent things I've ever experienced in my life. Those 55 seconds of just getting the absolute hell beat out of you, man. And you get down there and like your head's still ringing, your eyes are so big, and the people are talking to you, but it's you're not really hearing anything. You're just like, what just happened? Like, I have no idea. And they're like, you ready to do it again? I was like, absolutely not. Like, give me a second here. I can't, things are going so fast, you can't even like find the strap on your helmet to like, so take your helmet off because you feel like you can't breathe. Like everything was just going so fast. But yeah, you'll see
Jeez.
guys that'll bite it and then like they'll just be going skidding on their bottom like down the first turn and like, well, there goes the sled. Like, good luck, buddy. Like, and so yeah.
Jeez. Were you able to look up, or did you just have to
Yeah,
duck
so you
down the
have to
whole
duck
time?
down the whole time because it's aerodynamic. So you want to be lower than the person in front of you. So if it's just you and the pilot and a two-man, you got to be real low. And then if it's in your four-man, you just kind of try to stagger it. So your head's always down. And so you do what's called mind runs. And so you have to kind of memorize the turns in your head the same way the pilot would. And so you're counting. And so, like turn one's right, turn two's left, left again, straight, big right, big left. So you're not like going the opposite direction that the sled is, and you don't get so far out of whack with the other members in the sled. So there's just little intricacies like that you pick up over time. So it's pretty interesting.
It's just
Yeah,
wild.
I would liken it to what like you typically do like 2 runs a day, which is just two times down the track. And Lake Placid, New York, where the Olympics was in the 80s, that's one of the rougher tracks in the world. I mean, you just get absolutely canned, and it's it is like a full padded practice for football stuffed into 55 seconds. And then you get out of there, and you're just kind of like, what just happened? You're just like, all right, here we go. I guess I got to do it again. And then you do it again, and then that's it. But I mean, it really is on TV when you're watching it, you just kind of see them gliding, and it just looks like they're going. But man,
Yeah.
you're getting
Looks easy.
rocked.
So the better you get at it, does it get smoother at all?
It depends on the track that you go to. Like Lake Placid, like you just embrace the suck and realize that everybody else that goes down this track is feeling the same way. But yeah, there are some tracks to where like, I think the fastest I ever went was about 94 miles an hour. And so you don't really have anything to hold on to. So the G forces kind of keep you in the sled. And so you have handles, but you're not really holding on to them. And so the G forces push you down into the sled. And so that once you kind of get more accustomed to that, you can kind of like learn where you can take breaths and kind of relax and let your body just kind of relax, and you're not fighting every single little hit and turn. So yeah, I mean, eventually you can get there, but it takes a while.
You say you have a pilot, right? One guy steering.
Yeah.
If you're not seeing anything, how do you steer?
Yeah, so he sees it obviously, but he's like just below, like his eyes are just below the bridge of they call it the cowling, so it's just above the tip of the sled because he wants to be as aerial as possible, right? So what I was talking about with the mind runs earlier is like they anticipate so much. Like when you drive a boat, you can turn it really hard and hit it, but then it doesn't react right away, right?
Mhm.
Like you kind of almost like have to anticipate, I want to turn into this cove, or I want to turn in and start doing it beforehand, and then so that's kind of the same way I liken it when they're driving the bobsled, because you're on these things on runners or the blades, and so you don't just have like tire grip. So you have to really anticipate what's coming in the turn by how high you're going on the next turn and what line you're trying to hit, so you can make sure that it drops you down to the other turn. So they're doing a mind run in themselves. So they're anticipating like, this is a line I hit on 1, this is a line I hit on 2, this is where I'm at on 3. And so it's pretty cool. I mean, and you'll see them before we go, they'll close their eyes, or they'll put like a little, almost like a bag over their head so they can't see anything, and they're doing a whole run with just their hands and their head movements, and you can watch them and you can see him. Okay, I know he's on 3, and he's on 4, and then he's on 5, and then you can see him do the whole thing. So they have to memorize it.
Okay, so the pilot has a huge mental load, and obviously sounds like he has a lot of studying of the track to do in order to
Yep.
be successful.
Yes, yeah, extremely. Yeah. So every day they do what's called a track walk, and they just exactly like it sounds like. They'll have to go start from the very bottom and walk their way up, and just expecting every turn, and then they'll walk with their coaches and other pilots and say, "Hey, this is the line I take on 19. Why do I take it here? This is the line I take on 17," and so on and so forth as they're walking up the track. So it's a lot of homework and a lot of being locked in, because when you get to that level and you get at those kinds of speeds, you're talking about some serious damage when you wreck. And obviously they don't want to do that, and they don't want to do that to us. So they feel a lot of pressure in that way.
Yeah, I can imagine so.
Yeah. So, and then, if you wear like the speed suit, so it's essentially like a track suit, but it's full length. And then you have underneath like a Kevlar shirt. So it's what motorcycle people will wear underneath if they were just wearing like a jacket, or sometimes the jackets are Kevlar lined, things like that. So it's basically to prevent road rash because that's how rough the ice is, because you just get absolutely torched.
Ouch.
Yeah.
That doesn't sound
Yeah.
fun.
No, it is not. Not fun when you're on your back, but it's just part of it. And, you get through it. I mean, you see some pretty nasty injuries sometimes, but
Just
yeah.
get through it. What
Yeah,
else can you
it's
do?
basically it. It's like, well, what else are you going to do? I mean, I'm not going to quit, so we'll be all right.
Yeah. So, as kids, your house was the hub. Like everybody, your brother's friends came over there. Me and Calvin came over there. Like that's just we do the sleepovers. Like that was always the hub. And I remember when we were little, we used to watch Cool Runnings a
Oh, yeah.
lot. And did you ever catch yourself going, feel the rhythm, feel the ride? Come on, United States, it's bobsled time.
No, but it's brought up often. That's obviously the easiest transition that anybody knows bobsled, right? It's like, oh yeah, I watched that one time. But the funny thing is that there's actually a couple guys from that Jamaican team that will like hang around the races and stuff like that and like try to make a little bit of money. Like he's selling stuff out of the back of his car and all kinds of stuff, and it's like in this little hatchback that's like painted like a Jamaican flag, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I was Cool Runnings," and all kinds of stuff.
That's
But
funny.
yeah, it's obviously it's great for the sport because that's obviously by far the most notoriety it's gotten. But yeah, just like any other sports movie, you're just like, that's impossible. Like that didn't happen. Like those sleds are ridiculously heavy. You did not carry that up the backstretch. Like there's, it's just stuff like that. Like you just don't do that.
Right. No, that makes a lot of sense. But no, it's crazy to me, being Oklahoma boys and growing up together and then watching that movie, and then who would have ever thought that a kid from Claremore, Oklahoma,
Yeah.
who had no experience
No hills.
in any ice sports, would somehow
Right.
wind up on the U.S. national team as a bobsledder.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm obviously blessed and fortunate to have that opportunity, man. It's just I just kept trying to stack opportunities in my favor just by working hard and then hoping things opened up. I mean, obviously it didn't end up quite the way I wanted to in other athletics, just with injuries and things like that. But I look back on those times and realize, that obviously the process is kind of what you actually end up remembering during the whole time. You always hear guys, like, hey, what am I going to miss the most when you retire? Or what are you going to do this? And it's, hey, I'm going to miss the locker room. I'm going to miss my guys, right? You guys know that, right? When you're playing
Yeah.
playing
Yeah.
sports, and then it's like I missed the process of trying to make myself better. What it took every day. I missed the dedication and things like that I was willing, because I thought it's going to get me that half a second faster or whatever it took. But yeah, it's been a fun ride, man, and I'm fortunate and blessed, and I'm still in one piece, so we're good.
Right. Like, no, it's amazing. It's an amazing story. Definitely, a success story at that. You brought up a good topic of, when an athlete's career comes to an end, I mean, luckily for you, you got to extend it. I mean, I'm sure basketball was probably your first love. And, I think you said to me one time, there's not a lot of 6'4" white guys that are shooting guards in the NBA.
Not many.
And
There's Steph Curry, and he's not white, and he can shoot. So
yeah, better than anybody that's ever shot.
Exactly.
Yeah, so the way that you were able to extend your playing career, Nathan went to a small school in Claremore, Oklahoma called Claremore Christian. They now have 8-man football, but at the time they did not have football at all. They had
Right.
soccer, basketball, and what is it, like A level?
Yeah.
So it's
Basically, yeah.
Single A,
Single
super
A.
Just a single.
super small school. Obviously Nathan's a hell of an athlete. Otherwise he wouldn't have gotten to where he got. But to me, to be able to, okay, you go to play baseball and basketball and, out of there and, that doesn't really work out for you. You blow your arm out and then you turn that into furthering your playing career. I mean, you never even played football. Like, you went to OSU, you walked on there, got to do a couple of years there. And then you get done with that. Like you said, you go to the training facility, you start working there, and you were able to, and a lot of it is, like you said, hard work and stacking opportunities, but you found a way to continue that athletic career that so many athletes, one, would never think about jumping sports, right? We get so hung up on singular sports that the idea of doing something we've never done before is just not in question. Like, not in the question. Like, it's this or bust. But to be open-minded, to be like, hey, this guy's doing it, I'm similar to that, I can do it. To have that mentality, like, that's awesome. And like, a ton of respect for that. Like, I mean, you really did make a career in sports. When one door shut, you open another for yourself. So I just think that's super awesome.
Well, I appreciate that, man. And I think that was honestly, it was just had to be my mindset, and I think even coming from the small school that I did, like, I obviously just like you always hear, like, I had a little chip on my shoulder because I viewed myself as an athlete, right? Like, I was like, hey, I'm just as good as this dude or this dude, and I wasn't getting the opportunities. And a lot of that was I didn't put myself in the right spaces because I was just ignorant at the time of, like, hey, you got to go get on these teams and go do these things, right? Like, I played club soccer. I did a few things, but I wasn't a part of, like, these getting in these big tournaments, or what club am I actually trying to be on, or for baseball, like a summer team and things like that. So, we take some responsibility for that too. But I do think you kind of brought that up a little bit, but going to such a small school and being allowed and not ever pressured to having to choose one. And, I was fortunate enough to be pretty good at several. It really was kind of the groundwork for what allowed me to continue to do that. So whenever I went, and even for instance, like something with like bobsled, I remember like one of the guys was like showing me something. He's like, this is kind of what we do. And I was like, in my mind, I was translating drills and things that I had done in football or things that I had done in soccer or things like that, knowing like, hey, I can do a crossover step. I've done that 1,000 times, in other sports, just stuff like that. So your point's very valid. I do believe that my ability to have a broad spectrum understanding of just athletics in general, not being focused on one thing, allowed me to keep that alive for as long as possible.
Yeah, that's super cool.
Very cool.
And you kind of touched on it too a little bit, and something that Justin's talked about, and like, whether you're a college athlete or high school athlete, if it ends after college and ends after high school, like, when you're a highly competitive person and a lot of times as kids, we base our lives around these sports. We're tunnel vision. We don't think of that there's going to be a life without sports. And then when your day ends, whether it's after high school or after college, and all of a sudden you gotta be, face the real world, that's a kind of hard for athletes to adjust to, because, everything you've built in your mind is sports focused, and, you're not gonna, like, you never have this thought in your head that you're not gonna keep doing it, right?
Right.
Like, and Justin was talking about this in one of our other episodes with Jack, Blackhawk pilot.
Yeah.
You've been in this competitive atmosphere with these other guys, and then all of a sudden it stops, and you trying to figure out how to, like, go into the rest of your life with that, and not being in that locker room, not being with those guys all the time, and not, because if it's a successful locker room, it's like a hive mind. Everybody's working towards the same goal, and everybody's got the same drive. And you made a good point with that. it's hard to let that go. It's, adjust to that life. When the bobsledding was done, were you at a point where you were just like, hey, I gave it my all, I turned every opportunity I could into something? Were you at that point in your life where you're like, I'm good to walk away from this?
I think my body was telling me yes. I was hurting. I've had a couple surgeries since and things like that, but mentally, there's some things that didn't end exactly how I wanted to, and so I wanted to continue to right those wrongs, but you kind of have that realization that, hey, man, I'm about to have a little kid. I was about to have my son at that time, my first son, and then you just kind of realize like, hey, this is time for me to step up from that standpoint. Kind of like you said, right? It's like you realize that, hey, this is life, and I can't really offset what I'm making in bobsled to be worth the time away from being a father and doing those things. And so I really had made that choice. But I would be lying if I said I wasn't in a dark place there for a little while afterwards. It's a tough mindset to, like you said, man. I spent my whole adult life with one thing in mind, and that was to become the best athlete that I could be and to continue to put myself in those situations, and then realizing that, hey, that chapter of your life's done. And while I couldn't be more blessed than I am to be a father, that's tough. It's tough, man. And it's you even though being a parent, as Stephen, as you know, and I don't know if you have any kids, Justin, but
Nope.
lucky for you, right? That's probably what you're thinking.
I mean, most of the time when I'm playing Fortnite and hearing a screaming kid in the background, yeah, I'm like,
exactly.
Yeah, I'm
But
like, hang on,
quiet
Justin,
eye.
I gotta
there's
go get him back in bed.
exactly. No, there's a piece of you that dies not in a negative way, right? Like you're giving them to yourself, a piece of yourself to your children. And that's just kind of the realization that I came to, man. Is like, that piece is too big to keep to myself anymore. I've got to be there, and it's tough. It took me a while. It took me a while to understand that it's okay to like not be okay, and that it's tough. It's tough.
Yeah, and Justin, you want to comment on that? I know you got some thoughts on this.
Oh, I mean, hey, I enjoy my free time and quietness. And
No, not on the
general
kid
peace
thing.
of
On
mind. As,
making that transition from sports to no sports.
Oh, dude, it's massively difficult. I was glad I was able to step into something more in a competitive job environment to keep it going.
Right.
But then it still comes to that realization. It's like, well, why am I being so competitive for what? Like,
Right.
It's like I need to transition just the mindset into something more like Shelby had said, is like there's abundance out there. It's not so scarce, because it was competitive as scarceness is like, well, there's only one number one spot. That's all there is. There's only one,
Right.
and I'm going to get
Right.
it. And now I'm like, well, what did that get me at the end? I was like, well, higher quotas, more work, more stress, more responsibility, more like all that. And I was like, well, I could just do this transition mindset into just like, it's gonna be there. Just like finish what you're doing, because I would leave so many loose ends, just things unwritten, and I'd be like, well, just go write them, just go get it finished, move on to the next one. So it got into more of completing one task and not trying to do it all at once. So I was like, I'm gonna do it all.
Yeah.
So it's been that mindset transition. Yeah, it's definitely good.
Yeah. I think, no, I agree. I think
it was easy.
I think, one thing that I've tried to apply from athletics like over to work, right? Because you're trying to find something, because you're never going to lose that part of your life, right? But you don't want to make it all for naught. So it's like, what is something that like you can help take over and continue to make yourself a better version of yourself moving forward? And I think, as you guys know, it's like when you're on a team, the only thing that really matters, the first thing is like doing your job. So whatever your job is like whatever you're supposed to be doing on this play, whatever your position is asking you to do. You can't even be a better teammate until you do your job first. Because if you start trying to do somebody else's job, then your job is slacking. And so like I've
never thought of it like that.
I've kind of found that to kind of be the same way when you look at it from a professional standpoint, is like, number one, and first and foremost, is you take care of your job. what am I getting paid to do? What am I supposed to be doing? So you take that one first, and then, secondly is like, I've never been on a team where blaming somebody else when something happened to you ever makes the team better. Like that
Yep.
never works. I don't care at what level you're on, like NFL, college, high school, right? Like if you mess up and the play goes wrong or something like that, and you tell the coach, well, hey, Steven was supposed to be covering this dude. And it's like, well, your dude scored, so why are you talking to me
Yeah.
about Steven?
Exactly.
So it's like that's another mindset I took in, is like, just take everything as it's yours. Take it as your responsibility no matter what. And in that way, you won't ever leave it up to somebody else's hands to do something. And I think those two mindsets I've really tried to carry over from it. And I think it's been good. It's allowed me to stay locked in and not blame others for anything else that comes my way.
No, self-accountability is essentially what you're talking about. And
Exactly right.
And
Yep.
that's it. I mean, in life, I mean, self accountability is, I mean, one of the most important things that there is, because once you're able to accept that you have to take responsibility for your own stuff, and nobody else is responsible for that other than you, then I mean, that's going to go a long ways in making your life go a lot smoother.
Yeah, exactly right. Because once you get yours figured out and once you take care of your business, all of a sudden everybody else's business gets taken care of too, because you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. And it's really easy in life and sports to get focused in on like, hey, our team's losing. Well, the only thing that you can really do is do your job, right? Bill Belichick, that's the most famous thing he ever says, right? Do your
Yeah.
job. It's like the sign on the Patriots door, right? Nick Saban, the same thing. All it says, do your job. And that's essentially all that he's saying, is like, hey, I don't care. Don't worry about what Tom Brady's doing. You
Yeah.
run your route. I guarantee you Tom Brady's going to do his job too.
Because that's been definitely a tough transition
Yeah.
to focus. Because with soccer being like, I always felt in so many capacities, it's like, well, just give me the ball.
Right.
I'm going to do what we need to win, or at least make that creation. So like the job transition has not been, let me do my job first. I was like, well, how could I get everybody else to rise their boats? Rather than, oh, my boat's already up there, which it may have been, usually is up there. Because then I get thinking of extra. I'm like, oh man, I've already hit it. All right, what's next? How can I help everybody else? And then all of a sudden, my boat's still down.
Right.
But it's a thought of do my job first. And where I was going with it was this focus that I've had getting back into this healthcare recruiting is doing remote. I think really helps, because all I am is me. There's nobody else to like talk about their problems or share or even like infiltrate any of their thoughts into my brain. It's just like me kicking it. And so as other people have done stuff, I haven't even paid attention. I barely know who's on my team.
Right.
to know like whose name am I keeping up with, or
Right.
what am I looking at? Because it's just like, it's such a that take on all that extra stress, all that extra whatnot. It's like, it's just me.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like, hey, I'm kicking it. And it's I really like the vibe. Like I don't think I would have been able to transition to that if I was in the office, because then I would have made friends and I would have talked to people and I would have known all their problems. I wouldn't have wanted it, or I want to solve all their problems. But now it's just mine. And I'm like, well, that was easy.
Yeah.
Next,
Yeah. No, it helps you stay focused, right? Like it helps you stay compartmentalized and not get outside of that. And so I've just found it really, really beneficial. I tried to really, it's kind of like how I help transition from sport to sport, like I was talking about, right? It's like, what do I take from other things that I've learned to help me pick up in the middle and not necessarily from the beginning? And so I tried to do the same thing now, and I'm doing all right.
Yeah.
So
That's a
can't
really
complain.
good point. And I'm not gonna take credit for your competitive spirit, but as I've said before to you and other people, me, Nathan, and Calvin Henry was our close friend in this group. Justin, you were asking me before we started this, kind of like there was 12 kids in his graduating class, or 15 kids or something like that. And
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah. And I was like, I think the most that I ever had in a class was like 12. I mean, usually average around like 10. So that was, we had grades with maybe one or two more, or, great. And usually grades with less than us. Like I remember us being one of like the biggest classes in Claremore Christian. But me, Nathan and Calvin in kind of that group were the top athletic kids in that group. So you have this really small pond, and you have three kids that are best friends and you're playing these sports at recess and stuff. And what happens when you have three? It's an odd number. So when you have an odd number, you either are on the other team, and which happened a lot, or you would do what we used to call it, me, Nathan, and Calvin versus all. So we might play like six other kids in the sport and still win, but like literally we'd go to recess and we'd be like, you know, whoever was saying it'd be like me, Steven, and Calvin versus all. Like there was a lot of times that we were taking on like 2 grades with just the 3 of us because like it was a super small pond, and that was a big gap difference. But what would happen most of the time when we played opposite of each other, you would have 2 players on one team and 1 person on the other team. Well, obviously the 2 that are together have the odds stacked in their favor of winning. Well, losing was not an option. So when we did do split teams, 2 of the 3 were fighting. By the end of the game, either me and Calvin were fighting, Nathan and Calvin were fighting, or whoever was that one person on the other team was fighting with one of the other 2, because that's how competitive we were.
Makes sense.
I don't know how many times we got in trouble, probably like every day, but like, I mean, literally the only way to keep the peace was for all 3 of us to be on the same team.
Yeah, that's eventually why they ended up doing it. Anybody started saying yes, it's because it was like it was going to end up in a fight any other way.
Throwing a basketball at each other, throwing hands, like, I mean, it was legit. And I think back on it now, and it too is kind of funny because if for whatever reason you weren't the person that got locked in with the other person, like you were always looking at it like, that's crazy. Like, what are they doing? Come on, guys. But then the next day or the next recess, it's you, and you're doing the exact same thing. Yeah. So it's like, it was just this ultra competitive atmosphere. And I felt like I took that into everything in sports throughout the rest of my life. Like, and it wasn't till like 25 that I finally like, you know, cause like it wasn't, I mean, it expanded far past sports. If we were playing Monopoly, like if I'm not winning, I'm getting mad. Like, cause like I wanted to win everything I was doing. And like that all originated from that group. So, at least for me, and I think I talked to Calvin about this one time, and I know we've talked about it a little bit before, but it was just like 3 kids and best friends and all pretty good athletes, and we weren't going to lose to the other 2. Like that was not an option.
No.
It was really just craziness. And I mean, I think all of us, it shaped in from an athletic standpoint and competitive standpoint, like to be the best you can be, and you know, want to go against the other best. And you know, when I got to Claremore and when I played other sports outside of school, I mean, it didn't change. Like that competitive spirit was always there. Our high school coach, he had this idea of making me an outside mid in high school, and I don't like running. Like, and if outside mid in soccer is the most running ever. Like you run up on offense, and then if the ball gets cleared, you got to go back and get on defense. And back. So it's just back and forth. This insane amount of running. And I'm like, right, like exactly. You're not getting the ball much, and if you're getting it, you're playing it into somebody else. Like
they're usually crossing it in.
Exactly. Like so, it's like this high effort, high, you know, workload, and little time of a spotlight, so to put it. And I wasn't a great runner, like as far as like conditioning. Like it just didn't matter. Like I could run all day. Like I'd do the 4-mile runs just like everybody else. But like when you turn that into sprinting back and forth, like I'm dying. And then you get these kids that are just cross country kids essentially, like playing outside mid, and you're trying to run with them, and it's like, I can beat you in the sprint, But when we got to go back the other way, I'm gassed. Like, it's just, but kind of where I was going with that, like, and this was like shortly after my huge car wreck I had too. So definitely was a different athlete after that. But our coach was sitting us down and talking about whether you're going to start or not. And he was like, I'm going to put you here and I'm going to go with you as the starter because you just want it more. I know that when the ball hits the ground, you may not be as talented as some other guys, but you're going to outwork them for the ball. And, that to me was just like vindication for just that competitive spirit. And especially after going through everything I went with that car wreck, because that was pretty much the following year. Because I wasn't the same athlete after that. But yeah, like we built that into each other just from that period.
But yeah, you're right. I mean, I think it's, you always hear, you gotta go to these bigger ponds and get yourself out there and shine in the bigger stuff. And there's a lot to that. I mean, there really is. I remember asking my parents, hey, I if this is what I want to do, I got to go to Claremore, or I got to go to Sequoia or Oolaga, or I got to, you got to put me out there a little bit. And they just kept saying, hey, if you're good enough, you'll get found, and we'll do this. And while there's some fallacies to that, there's also some truth to it. And I think even kind of getting back to even kind of what we're talking about with the portal and everything going on right now, just in that mindset is just saying, hey, you got to stick and grind it out.
Oh, yeah. Well, what's interesting in that bigger pond, the whole recruitment again, it started in Tulsa and got me out to Tampa, Florida. It got me to the bigger pond. Now I'm in Dallas and bigger pond. So it's like a complete, like, I almost had that feeling, I'm just a big fish in a small pond. And I mean, I do love that energy and that it's all about me. Selfishness, but then it just grows larger because you get challenged because you're still trying to grow at some capacity. And where's it at? It's like, well, this is what's important. This is where I need to grow. This is where I'm going to find a fault and I'm going to improve and do better and overtake and grow from there.
That's the truth.
Well, as we get closer to the end of this, got an ending question. Steven, you go with it.
Okay, yeah, we like to ask guests different questions and just kind of get their sense on kind of how they answer them and stuff. And I think the perfect one for this episode, Nathan, is would you view yourself as a hunter or a gatherer?
I think I've always had the hunter's mindset, just like in all areas, just like I'm constantly seeking and constantly trying to look on my own, realizing that the aggressor typically wins, right? It's like it's what my football coach always used to say, listen, on a play, there's only two people. There's a hammer and there's a nail. And you're going to be one of them on that play. So you'd like to be the hammer more often because the nail doesn't feel good. So
that is a great analogy.
You try to have that mindset, right? I mean, it's just typically, you typically don't see two hammers hit together, but you'll see somebody get hammered and somebody get nailed into the ground. But yeah, I think that's the mindset I try to have, is just that hunter aspect. The aggressor, they go and make it happen, not necessarily waiting for the fruit to come on the vine and gather it up, but really go out there and go get it.
Very nice. One more follow-up question. Okay. It's kind of a two-part question. What was the worst experience of your athletic career, and what was the highlight of your athletic career?
That's a good one. I think the worst experience was the first major injury, just because you have that first realization that it's not all up to you, that some of this is taken out of your hands. And then this, it's that mental, Stephen, as you went through a lot with the car wreck and things that you went through, it's like the doctor can tell you, hey, Stephen, you're fine. You can go to school. You can start doing athletics again, right? It doesn't feel that way until you yourself believe that, hey, I take that first slide across, that late hit in soccer. Is my ankle going to snap again, right? Or am I going to be okay? And so for me, it was having baseball taken away from me in that way was the most devastating that thing that happened to me at my time in my life. Just rebounding from that and realizing that just because that door closes doesn't mean it's the end. And so that was something that at the time was, I mean, mentally I was toast. I was like, you can't be serious. Like, I'm 19 years old and I can't even get to a mound again, and it was tough. So yeah, probably that.
And I totally understand that because, I had doctors that said, hey, you can't play football again.
Right.
Like, that's out of the question. You'll never play football again. And then, once I started getting back into athletics, your brain is still operating under the assumption that your body can still react the same way.
Right.
And that, there is a ton of frustration when you're trying to do things that you easily and normally did, and your body
Right.
cannot keep up with your brain
yeah.
anymore.
It's tough.
So yeah, it's definitely a mental aspect you have to overcome for sure. Yeah, I mean, you obviously, like you said, it was hard, but you adjusted.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think probably one of the highlights, if I just have to think here off the top of my head, it was pretty cool. We were the first college team to ever play in New Jerry World. So we played in the Cotton Bowl, and that was the year that it opened up, even for the Dallas Cowboys as well. And so that was pretty fun, just being a part of something like that and being a part of a little bit of history. The highlight, I don't necessarily have one single thing, but I think just being able to be around some of those guys in that time of my life and really learning from them and seeing those guys. But yeah, that Cotton Bowl experience was pretty fun, just being a part of a little bit of history
Very
there.
nice. No, I didn't realize that you guys were the first team that played in there.
Yeah, it was pretty cool, man. It was Jerry, Jerry knew Boone Pickens very well, big money. So he was always down on the field with us while we were practicing there and hanging out. And so he even came into our stadium one time and stuff like that. But yeah, it was.
Did you ever get to talk to Jerry?
Nothing outside of just saying hello, and he kind of, said a few words, but yeah, nothing real personal.
Yeah, me and Nathan have been Dallas Cowboy fans since we've been little kids, and through the good times and the bad times, and in our lifetime, there's been a lot more bad than good. So go Cowboys this weekend. Let's take down the Niners.
That's right. Just like it's 94.
But no, that's super cool. I mean, even getting to say, hello to him would be pretty cool. Well, I think that covers about everything tonight, Nathan. We really appreciate you coming on and talking with us. And maybe as the landscape changes, we'll talk about this college stuff again. And hopefully everything and your work life continues to go in the right direction. And I believe you got 2 kids now, right? I think we heard
2
one
boys.
of them earlier. I think we heard the
yes,
young
you did.
one.
Yeah, he was a little upset. Yeah, you're right.
A lot of sleepless nights when they're that age.
That's exactly right. Yep.
Congratulations on the new one. I know it's been in the last couple of months that you guys have introduced that one to the family.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, 3 months old.
Yeah,
so we're doing
that's
good.
awesome.
Nice.
Well, I think that is it for tonight. And this is Justin and Steven. And this is the Bloodthirsty Salamander Experience. And we're signing off.
Later.
There it is.